Hi everyone, welcome back to Planet Dirt. My name is Alicia, and today we are starting seeds. We are starting more seeds. I started sweet peppers and hot peppers already, and some eggplants, and a few flowers. But today I'm going to start my first round of tomatoes. Now, it is way too early for me to be starting tomatoes. It is about 3 weeks earlier than I should be starting them for my greenhouse. And my greenhouse, I can usually get an extra 3 to 4 weeks of growing time. So it is really, really early for me to be starting tomatoes in general. I can't put tomatoes out into my garden until at least the second week of May generally. So it is way too early for me. But that being said, my mom found something on a gardening channel and we're going to experiment with it. It's called a water wall and I'd never heard of it before. So I'd never heard of this before. It is a layer of plastic and it has like little tubes in it and you fill them with water and it creates like a little mini greenhouse for the plants. And it says online that you can get an extra month of growing time generally out of using these. So we're going to try and see. And I have extra tomato seeds, so I'm going to only plant tomatoes today that I have a lot of seed for. It's going to take me several years to go through all this seed. So I'm going to start some of those plants today so that in a few weeks we can put them out in the garden with these water walls over them and experiment and see how well they actually work. I'm not doing all of my tomatoes because some of them, let's find an example really quick. Like this tomato pack, it only has 10 tomato seeds in it. And I've never grown this one before, but for such a little packet of seeds, I'm not going to waste these on an experiment. Whereas some of the other ones, they have 25, 50 seeds in them. I never grow more than 3 to 5 at the very, very most of any given tomato variety in a year. And so it's going to take me several years to go through those seeds anyway. So if I lose 2 or 3 to an experiment like this, I'm not going to be heartbroken. So I have several tomato seeds I'm going to start today. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to get some basil started. So my basil, I also wouldn't generally be starting for a couple of weeks, but basil's the kind of thing where one, I know I can harvest off of it early if it gets too big. And two, I have green stalks that I can be putting the basil in. I have several rows of different lettuces and spinaches that are in my green stalk right now that I'm going to have to harvest early because they're just too big to really be in a green stalk, but I wanted to get some greens growing and they grow pretty fast. So things like bok choy, my bok choy is already pretty big in there. My Mizuna mustard is already pretty big in there. There's a couple of other things that are pretty sensitive to heat. So by the time my basil is up and going, I'll have places to put it. And basil is a lot more tolerant to heat than any of those other things. Basil will bolt on you, but as long as you're harvesting it pretty regularly, which I do, I use it a lot, it'll keep producing and producing. So I will have places to put basil no matter what. And so I'm going to start some of that today as well. That being said, let's get some labels going and I will show you the tomato varieties that I have several of that I'm going to be planting. All right, so I'm going to preface this list by saying I do have a garden plan and it tells me how much I have to limit my tomatoes by so that I don't go overboard because there are so many varieties of tomatoes that it's really easy to get carried away and you can use them for different types of things. So in my greenhouse, I'm going to only be planting determinate varieties of tomatoes and I have to limit myself to, I think, 5 varieties that I'm going to put in the greenhouse. And I think that means I'm pretty sure I can have 2 plants of each variety, and I'm only doing 5. And then outside of the greenhouse, I have room for 9 indeterminate varieties. So what I'm going to be talking about today is not all of them, because like I said, I have a few that I only have a few seeds left, and I know I really like them, so I'm going to wait to plant those out and get those seeds started until it's actually the right time for my climate. I don't really want to experiment with those. So first, I'm going to be planting the Rio Grande tomato. This one is a semi-determinate. I'm going to put it in the greenhouse, and that's a new variety to me. So the seed pack is full. I have tons, and so we're going to experiment with that one. San Marzano, and this one is also semi-determinate. That one's going to go in the greenhouse as well. I'm only putting determinate and semi-determinate in the greenhouse, and the semi-determinates I think only are supposed to get to like a max of 5 feet. I don't know, so we'll see how that goes. I have a banana legs tomato, and this one's a determinate. And then I have Aunt Molly's ground cherries. So this one I have a lot of seeds for, and I didn't love it. So I'm going to experiment with this one because I wasn't like super into it, but I do think it's fun. And I know my mom will probably like it and get a kick out of it. So I'm going to start these ones as well. Black cherry. This one's an indeterminate. It's going to go outside. When we get those water walls, I'll share a link to the ones that we got, and I'll show a picture so that you have an idea of what I'm talking about. When we get those, I think I'm going to try to plant some in the greenhouse and some outside to see how much of a season extension we can get out of these. With tomatoes and peppers, like especially the indeterminate ones, it's so good to get a jump on them and get them started early, but it's a real pain to continue to have to up pot them and make sure your grow lights are working right and making sure you're staying on top of the water in the little pots that dry out quicker. So the earlier you can get started, the better. But if you start them too early, they become really difficult to manage by the time you would plant them out. So we kind of just are trying to straddle that line. Roma tomato. This one's just a standard Roma, and it's also determinate, going in the greenhouse. All right, red pear tomato. This one's an indeterminate. I think this came in my gardener grab bag. I don't think that I purposely got this one. It's kind of the size of a cherry tomato, but it's shaped like a pear. I guess it's bigger than a cherry tomato, but they're still pretty small. Paul Robeson. This one's a good solid tomato. I just have a ton of the seeds, so I'm going to be experimenting with that one. Same for the Cherokee Purple. Really good tomato, really good flavor. I just have a ton of seeds, so I'm experimenting. I'm also going to be doing a cherry tomato, and that's honestly only because there are like 100 seeds in this packet, and it will literally take me a decade to go through 100 seeds. So I'm going to experiment with that. And then this one also came in the M.I. Gardener grab bag. It's an indeterminate, and there's only 10 seeds in this one, but I haven't grown it before, so I don't know if I'm going to love it. And it says it's a dwarf indeterminate, and that means that it's really small, right? Like the plant is really small, or the fruit is really small too. I don't know. It's going to be an experiment, so I'm going to grow some now, and then I'll also grow some later. Because it's a dwarf indeterminate, I figure I'll be able to find a place to put it, and I can still put it in a container, even if I don't have in-ground areas for it either. So maybe that can be a part of the experiment too. I can put one in a container with the water wall as well. And then lastly, I'm also going to be growing my tomatillos. And that is also because I just have a ton of seed. I don't know why I have 2 of these packets. Um, I have like 50 seeds, and it'll probably take me, 5 years to go through that many seeds. So I'm going to grow some now. I'm going to grow some later and see if we can just get a jump start going on the season. All right, so as far as basils go, I'm only going to start my lemon basil today and my Genovese basil. So I have so many different types of basil. I love basil. It's my favorite herb. And I have dark opal and cinnamon and licorice and Thai and purple and all different varieties. Lemon and sweet basil are the ones that I use the most. So that's what I'm going to start early. And I'll start some more later when I'm starting the rest of my tomatoes and the rest of my basil. So I'm going to get these going as well because, like I said, I know I'll use it. And if I only have a couple of small basils, even if it's still pretty cold by the time I'm putting it out, and I can't put it out in the greenhouse yet, which I don't think will happen, but even if it does, if I still have just a couple of plants, I can just put them in little pots and keep them in my house on a windowsill or something, and they'll be perfectly fine. I won't have to worry about potting them up. Basil also is really easy to propagate. So it's one of those things where if you start some early or have some left over from the end of the year before it freezes, you can just cut some off, stick it in some water on your windowsill, and it'll root out in a week or two. And if you stick it in some soil, it'll keep growing. If you don't, you still have fresh basil for a few weeks. So it's one of my favorite things, one of my favorite flavors, and it's super easy to grow. I love it. So I'm going to get those in some soil as well. And let's start planting. All right, as I'm labeling, I thought of one more thing. So this is the label for, I don't know if it's just not focusing. This is the label for one of the tomatoes, and this one is the dwarf indeterminate. And so I made sure to put that on the label. I don't want just the variety on the label. I also want to know if it's a determinate, indeterminate. This one is the dwarf. So I know that I can also put this one in a container if I run out of space. So I like to put all of that type of information on the label as well. Something like a tomatillo, like I only have one type, so it doesn't matter what I put on it. But things like tomatoes, when they're growing patterns are different. The size of the tomato, the color of the tomato, maybe it's something that you have to pay attention to the coloring in a specific way to know that it's even ripening. There are a couple of different types of tomatoes that their shoulders stay green even though they're ripe. And so if you wait for them to fully turn color, the bottom will be rotten by the time the top turns red as well. So stuff like that, I like to put that on the label as well, just so that I know what to look for. And this year I'm going to be much more careful with where I put my labels. Every year I learn a little bit more about labeling. And last year I had these lovely labels, which I really like. I can put the link to these in the description. I just got them off of Amazon, but they have a UV marker that they come with. It's like 100 or something ridiculous. Oh, it's 1,000, 1,000 pieces. They were relatively cheap. They work great, and I like the different colors that they have because they're easier to see against the dirt. But the one thing that I did learn was I wanted to make sure to label if something had a different growing pattern, like this one's a dwarf indeterminate. So if it's determinate, I'm going to make sure to put that on the label. And then the placement of these. So some of the peppers that I had in my greenhouse, I had put the label for some reason like behind them where I had them. And so by the time the plants got really bushy and big, I couldn't find the label anymore. And so I was looking around for it. I thought I just lost it. And then at the end of the season, when I was pulling it up, I think I even made a comment in my video where I was pulling up all of my stuff. I was like, oh, there's the label. It was just way behind it, and it had gotten buried under a little bit of soil, and so I could barely see it. And that pepper wasn't even the pepper that I thought it was. Like, I thought my Cubanelles were Jimmy Nardellos, and I was like waiting for them to turn red, and it just took forever. And it's because they were Cubanelles. It was fine. I was honestly mostly harvesting them green anyway, but I thought it was weird that they weren't turning red, and it's because they were Cubanelles. They were not Jimmy Nardellos. They still tasted really good. Anyway, so let's all be better about that. And when I say we, I mean me. All right, y'all, I'm gonna get that inside and get it watered. I don't know if you noticed it was pretty dusty. I thought I had pre-moistened that soil enough, but apparently I did not. So I'm just gonna bottom water it, and then I'll spray the top with just a squirt bottle to make sure that the top is moist as well. I do have a heating pad inside that I will be putting it on, and it's just not warm enough out here in the greenhouse. Like, it's pretty hot right now. But today was a glorious day, which is why I am outside. It got up to like 63 degrees outside today. So it feels like spring. It feels really lovely. And in the greenhouse, it's like 85, even with the door open. So it's really nice outside right now. But it's still getting into like the mid 20s at night. So it's just not warm enough out here to germinate any tomato seeds. So I have those inside, and then I have some grow lights set up for when things start to germinate. I have a few peppers that have germinated. It's very exciting. Usually they take a good 3 weeks, and it's been about 2, and I have some Tabasco peppers up, which is insane. That's crazy fast for Tabasco peppers. And I also have some poblanos, and my jalapenos are just barely starting to come up. I can see the little white part coming out of the seeds. So hopefully those will be up in a day or 2. So I'm super excited about that. A couple of notes about the tomatoes. So most of those, as you can see, I was only putting 1 seed in each hole. These are experiment tomatoes. If I get literally anything out of them, I'm going to be happy. So I didn't want to waste seed. Usually I oversow. I will plant at least 2 seeds in each cell, and then I'll split them apart. But for this, it's just for an experiment for the water walls. So I don't want to start more than I'm going to have water walls for. And so for those, I only did 1 per cell. The tomatillos, the ground cherries, I did a couple of those per cell because that seed is older. It's not from this year. It's from, I think, at least 2 years ago. So I did do more than 1 on those, but also there's like 200 seeds in each of those packets. So I'm not worried really about wasting seed for those. The basil, I also overseeded, but basil, I will use a ton of basil no matter what. So that one's also pretty low risk. All right, thanks so much for coming along with me today. I hope you had fun. I had fun. I can't believe I'm already starting tomatoes. In my climate, I'm usually starting them like mid to late March, and even that's pushing it a little bit. So I'm excited to see if this works out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. It really helps me when I'm growing my channel. And I hope I see you next time. Bye.